This is Movies, a podcast about the act of cinema, and with me today, he's been leaving me weird voicemails all week. It is Hans.
Merry Black Christmas, everyone. It's January, what, 9th. Happy Orthodox Christmas.
You're a big fan of the Orthodox.
Oh, yeah, because I totally know what that is, yeah.
Speaking of Black Christmas, I tried to tune into the Mel Gibson episode of Joe Rogan today, and one thing I've noticed is that if you start to stream it from your phone directly, if you have a Fire Stick or a Chromecast, that's when they love to throw in the 40-minute advertisements. And so all of my advertisements, anytime I do that, anytime I'm watching something longer, they always take me to some old Jewish man who's talking for almost an hour about a historical fact. Or today, I got littered with an episode of Moguls Unleashed, which is a talk show hosted by a black woman on a fake red carpet. And it's about how to manage your money or something, how to be cool with money. I don't know what the fuck this is about, but then I'm working and I'm trying to listen to Joe Rogan, and then suddenly I look over, I'm like, oh yeah, Mel Gibson hasn't said anything for 45 minutes. Why is there this Oprah looking lady on my television? And
Mel
that's
Gibson
the trick.
it's a black woman now, all of a
Yes.
sudden.
He was talking about how he was going to do the Passion of the Christ 2, the Resurrection of the Christ.
Did you see it on YouTube or Spotify?
It's on YouTube. I watch Rogan typically on YouTube these days,
Uh,
now that he's back
yeah,
on there.
YouTube Premium is way too expensive for me to pay for that. Just like $20 or something. It's
Mm.
so expensive for what you get. I tried doing the ad block thing, but they're very good at noticing it now and like recognizing it. And at one point, it says that they'll ban your account if you don't disable it. So
Really?
I'll just
Huh.
just deal with the ads. But
No,
I
I
keep
used
getting
to.
I keep getting the same ads of like, if you live outside of the United States, go to this website so you can order products or whatever, My US or something. I keep
Mhm.
getting those things. It's just like I'm fucking
No,
Australia,
I
but
I
I
used
don't
to
get
do
that.
YouTube Premium just so I could listen to people's live streams as I was walking around and not have my phone
Mm.
on. But really, if you have any standard pair of Apple headphones that have the little clicky part, well, the trick is you just start playing the video on YouTube, then you move the app to like a little micro window, close your phone, and then hit the button, and it'll start playing. The old workaround trick. And it's like, oh, wow, I don't have to pay $18 a month or whatever outrageous amount of money they were charging people for that.
Yeah, they still haven't disabled that, I guess. Um,
They try.
but
I feel like for a while they did successfully disable it, and then nothing. But that's all right. I wonder how many people do that with this show instead of just going on over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leaving us a very nice 5-star review. I will never, ever neg 5-star reviews ever again, like I did during our favorite viewings of 2024 special, where I
yeah,
started to do that.
why?
Thank you for stopping me there because I started listening back to that. So every so often, I'll listen to an older episode. Actually, as a matter of fact, I jumped into some older episodes last night as I was working because I started going through the archive that's on Spotify of all the episodes, and I was updating the podcast art for a new year since I don't wear non-prescription glasses and trench coats that often anymore. I was like, this is a very OFC look, and OFC is on ice for reasons that I cannot disclose at the moment. And I thought, all right, well, let's update it with the modern production. And so I threw in some new art from our disorderly shoot, some of your webcam, not webcam, sorry, Polaroid photos, and then behind the scenes photography of myself. So you'll see that now in the Spotify feed. But I started going back into some of the best of the year specials that were recorded for 2023, 2024, 2020, 20, going all the way back since we started movies. And I kind of jumbled together the 2018 and 2019 list because I had written those and then posted them on the old Low Res Wonder Bread website,
Hmm.
which will be revamped pretty soon. And this was all in preparation for the upcoming Best Films of 2024 episode. I think I've seen everything that I need to see. I have tickets to The Brutalist for tomorrow night that I'm going to be checking that out. And I feel like, all right, once I get that out of the way, all the heavy hitters, got them. We'll
Right.
see what winds up making the list. I just don't want any blind spots going into making that list.
I was kind of curious about that A Real Pain movie, but I don't know if I
It's pretty good, but it's not best of the year good. And I think a lot of the people that are hailing it as something remarkable maybe just had low expectations for Jesse Eisenberg as a director. Kieran Culkin's good, but let's be real. He's just kind of playing his Succession character in a different context, which is
it's
fine. That's okay. But I think it was just an easy, well, we've given him awards before at the Golden Globes when he got Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor, whatever the hell it was.
yeah, he's just playing the same guy.
Yeah.
That's what he plays now, right? He's been typecasted as like the I guess wild brother that's not very wild, but just like a little irresponsible, I
Hmm.
guess. Yeah.
The brother who likes to party on the weekends. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
just looks tired constantly.
all that to say, going back into the movie's archive, it's like, oh yeah, this show goes through different phases and different stages of what the program looks and sounds like. And we would have strings of guests in particular years where we do just an abundance with X, Y, or Z. And then you look at this year, this past year in review, and it's like, oh yeah, these people weren't on at all. They just disappeared. It's just, okay, clean slate. Or we get into cycles of having on a lot of people we've never had before.
Mhm.
Or I mean, I feel like in 2024, though, it was the same roundup of like 10 people the entire year. It was Simeon Jimmy, it was Wolfman, it was Eggy, it was Jake, it was Jerry, it was all the familiar characters. We didn't really go off the reservation in terms of making any new social ties through the program by having on guests that had things to promote or just were interested in shooting the shit about XYZ movie that we hadn't really spoken to before.
I think George maybe was the only one I can think of from Film Journal.
Yeah, George Dahl made two
Yeah.
appearances. I was thinking like DC, but DC first appeared in
But
2022, actually.
yeah, we were on his show like
Well, I
when
don't count
20
it if we go on somebody else's show. If they get
well,
invited to our show, that's the grander gesture, or at least I would think so. So just looking at the archive here, it's like, okay, well, who do we got that is not really a regular player in the mix? Technically, E-Rich from Monkey Jones's podcast, but that wasn't like really. He was just kind of a package deal with him.
yeah.
Nothing against E-Rich. We would have E-Rich on, I'm sure, but it's like,
Well,
okay, well, you're, you know.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that. So what you're saying is we should reach out to more people to have different guests
Maybe.
on the show?
I don't know. I think it's fine as is. I think it's best to not even really think about that type of thing. But I was just really observing how every single year has had a different type of vibe from the year before. And
Yeah.
whether that takes shape in guests and how we're recording the program, what it looks like, what you look like, what I look like, it's this ever evolving thing. I think it's kind of interesting. But all that to say, Anthony Cisco is still banned forever from movies.
Yeah, you bag.
Uh,
Anyway,
well,
so Black Christmas is the
Black
movie for
Christmas. What's your
today.
favorite Black Christmas movie?
The 1974 Black Christmas.
Friday 3?
I didn't realize that there's three, like two remakes. I honest because I know I did an episode of this on Jake's show, like however years ago,
Dude,
three,
I
four
tuned
years
into
ago.
some random episode. I think it might, I don't even remember. Oh, it was the Batman and Robin episode we did, episode 96 or something, or 97. Way far back. Because I wanted to listen and just be like, what did the audio sound like?
It
Because
was
it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it definitely was that long ago. And if you
yeah,
look at the video from that time, that was like when we first started doing video, is the late 90s of movies.
this yeah.
And it's just what we've mentioned before, just close-ups of our faces, Zordon,
The
two
Zordon,
Zordons.
yeah. Yeah, just swollen
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID, just two swollen Zordons.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, listening back to that, it's remarkable how shit the quality of audio was on your end, like straight up
Yeah.
landline, and mine isn't even that great either. And how I speak is different. How like the slowness of my cadence. Like I tuned into the episode and it was literally like 4 seconds of the music, which is it shouldn't be the case, and then this is Movies, a podcast about the act of sin. And with me
No
today
energy, yeah.
is
Very NPR.
Hans. Very
NPR.
sleepy. Big, doughy, sleepy boys.
NPR low res. Is
Yeah.
that what we need to go back to before
Hell,
episode 100?
hell no. Absolutely not. I just stocked up on energy drink. I got one of those Sour Patch Kids ghost energy drinks. I don't know
Oh,
why. You know why? Because Dalton
this,
Pruitt made me a lot of money. That's why. And I'm buying stupid shit that I would never
this,
typically buy because I'm
so
horrible with money.
you're
Um,
trying to get diabetes like me, I
No,
see.
no, no, zero sugar. You think I would buy a
Oh,
sugar energy drink? Come on now.
well, this is sour gummies. I don't know why I would
Gummy
think.
flavor. Gummy flavor. It's all artificial. It's distilled. It's like when you would
Yeah.
make the vodka out of Sour Patch Kids or gummy worms back when you were 17 years old. You're looking at YouTube tutorials and hanging out with fat girls.
Yeah. I remember those days. I never did that. I think the most we did was maybe like jelly shots, but then we,
That's
I
such a
wasn't mu
UK thing, by the way, jelly shots.
yeah, I wasn't much of a drinker to begin with, especially like liquor. So I just remember I would have like three of those and then just fall asleep. So I wasn't much of a party person. Hey, let's pre-drink, and then after pre-drinking, I'm like, all right, cool, I'll just stay home. I'm already drunk.
Mm. Well,
Mm.
today's a very special episode. It's our first sponsored episode of the new year, and it comes to us from Dream Machine, who has been very reliable with his picks in the past. He's been a sponsor of this program for several months. He had us talk about Golden Hour, the Ralph Seppi drug epic. He also had us discuss Lost Highway, which I think is one of our better episodes, and people tend to agree with that. So, also King Candy was another pick from Dream Machine. So, Dream Machine has a pretty good track record here in terms of his selections. And if you would like to select a movie for us to talk about on this show, head on over to patreon.com/lowers and sign up for our listener sponsored tier. We have a link in the description below that you can click and you can do it right now. And the January slate is pretty wide open. So if you were to sign up today as you're listening to this, we might record it 24 hours from now and you might have it like that. So think about it. We've had a very eclectic array of movies we've talked about, but I think the listener sponsored tier has brought us some of the most interesting and infuriating and terrible and great picks that we've
Yeah.
had in the history of the show. Selections like Goodbye Uncle Tom, or what's one of your favorites that we've had picked for us? Sauna. People said that was a surprisingly good episode. The guy who sponsored us and gave us Sauna might be writing an essay for us to read in defense of his selection. So yeah, we'll even entertain that. So again, patreon.com/lowres, and you can become essentially a producer for one episode.
Yeah. Go well, I was gonna say goodbye, Uncle Tom. You took that away from the list of my favorites so far. But
Because I couldn't think of any others, to be
yeah.
honest.
Yeah, this movie we're gonna talk about though, so I'm a big fan, and I think you mentioned a couple of episodes ago that you've never seen it before.
Correct. This is my first time watching Black Christmas, and I was obviously very aware of it because I used to be a fan of horror. I don't like horror fandom. You know what I watched recently? I watched George A. Romero's Resident Evil, the documentary
Oh,
on his unmade Resident Evil film. And the filmmakers in that who helmed the documentary, I looked into this movie many years ago and talked to some people who were in like the general circle of things that were basically present but not involved in the movie as it was starting to
Right.
be ushered forward. And I got more intel for like a 5 minute YouTube video than they wound up getting for this 2 hour and 2 hour and change documentary. It was a long documentary. And it's a well made documentary. A lot of these horror documentaries actually are pretty terrible. Like I was watching the Pet Cemetery, and they ran into a cycle of doing not just unmade movies, but then they would do these celebratory documentaries like Pennywise, the story of it, or the Pet Cemetery documentary, or Fright Night. All of these iconic '80s movies, which frankly are not even that good, wind up with 3 hour documentaries that give the cast members of them something to do for the first time in 25, 30 years, which is nice, I guess. But, and I'm not against the idea in theory, but really we had it better when these were designated as DVD special features and not movies themselves. But some of the movies that had come about from that were really bottom of the barrel. The Pet Cemetery one specifically sticks in my mind as
Yeah.
really poor quality, like below YouTube quality documentary filmmaking. And yet it was very popular. And I was hesitant to check out George A. Romero's Resident Evil, but I'm a big fan of Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And I like George A. Romero. And it's a well made documentary. It's decent, but it's not anything special. You're not going to really learn anything new, especially if you had already investigated the Resident Evil movie that he was preparing back in the late 90s.
Well, you made a documentary about it, right? On the
Yeah, yeah,
channel.
short. There was after the It deconstruction documentaries popped off on YouTube when Andy Muschietti's version of It was coming to theaters. I dug into several drafts of what would have been Cary Fukunaga's version, and
Mm.
I learned a hard lesson about journalism in those weeks when those documentaries became popular on YouTube because I realized, oh, everyone's now stealing my research and they're not crediting me. Nobody else had the details that I dug into and formulated them. And now I listen to podcasts where they're talking about the It movies and they're citing my research without giving me credit for it. But all the same, we do that all the time. We don't even think about it. If we read something on fucking any given website, we're not giving credit to the website. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's what this game really is. You can work your ass off to do this research and put together these documentaries that are going to be like highly stylized and tell people what this version of things would have been. And then they can just take that and it
Yeah.
exists and it's not yours. And it was never really mine, but you put the effort into building that, into doing that, and you get a couple $100 of YouTube bucks, or maybe I made like a couple $1,000, frankly, off of those documentaries. Nothing crazy. And then it just is out there and people are free to use it. And
Is
that was another thing too that made me veer away from doing the documentary work on the platform, because what is it for? Unless that is really your passion, what's it
mhm.
for? I like
Yeah,
filmmaking.
I was about to ask, is that why you stopped making them? Because it's too much effort for the return.
Yeah, that was part of it. I think my fascination with unmade movies also died down rather quickly. Once I dug into that, and then the best movies that could have been made and weren't made have already been covered. You
Hmm.
got Jodorowsky's Dune, Superman Lives. What else do you need? There's a couple of
Batman Year
interesting
One.
David Lynch movies, but there's also not a whole lot of information. So even if you were to pick a movie, that doesn't mean anything about the availability of the information that's out there, or maybe it just wasn't developed enough. And in the case of Resident Evil, the George Romero script, I remember reading that when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I reread it when I was about 20, and I thought to myself, this isn't even well written. This is actually kind of a bad script. This documentary that just came out, they didn't really get any new information. It's stuff all you would be able to find online. So that was unfortunate. It was a bit disappointing because I was looking forward to this documentary, but
More
it
stuff
looks
there.
good. It was strung together well. It's just not really a documentary about his Resident Evil. There's a bit of that, but there's not a whole lot to it.
So what's the documentary about if it's not that?
It's mainly about George Romero. There's a lot
Wow.
on. There's like 30, 40 minutes on George Romero at the beginning, and then at the end when he was dying, and then you have a slice of. It's like it's not even a Resident Evil documentary. It's more George Romero. It's like okay,
Because I downloaded it from YTS because I saw that, but then I was curious as to what it was. Because I'm not like I like Romero a lot. Like I was one of the first horror directors that I followed as a young 20-something-year-old, but not really a huge fan of the Resident Evil series. Like I never played it that
hmm
much, but I was curious as to what that was. But I guess I won't be getting that much new information because there's not that much out there from it.
yeah. I think the history of Resident Evil is something that's kind of fascinating. Not that it's like anything special, but just having grown up with the games, that was my exposure to horror gaming back in the late '90s. I remember my cousin bringing over the PlayStation hard plastic discs and telling me about that and showing me the first Resident Evil game. He had the director's cut. And then I
Mm.
got Resident Evil 3 Nemesis and Resident Evil Survivor and playing those games late at night and trying to put yourself in the headspace of navigating those maps. And it was always a great time. There's a very solid book called Itchy Tasty about the history of Resident Evil that is so informal about where it started, who had the idea for this thing. And the thing you learn about many successful Japanese properties is they're all ripoffs of something else. And so
Mm.
Resident Evil was a ripoff of Sweet Home, which is a very strange haunted house movie that had a video game of its own. Back when I was doing Let's Plays, I had a couple of guests, and there were unreleased episodes, and Justin Wang was a guest for one of those and decided the video game, and it was the Sweet Home video game. And I don't even have a memory of playing the game or watching the movie, but it's very easy to find out there. So, anyway, we
Hmm.
can
I
revert back to Black Christmas here. I know you did one episode, and this was what I was going to say before. On the episode of Batman and Robin we did, you mentioned the co guest on Jake's show that you were on with. And I was like, oh, wow, that's weird synchronicity. This person is another banned individual. And not even really banned individual. It's just I would never have this person on the show. They haven't really done it. They were another weird person. Sometimes you get weird people in your circle, and they're fans, and it's fine if you're a little weird and you're a fan. That's okay. But Jake made the mistake of bringing this guy onto his show. And some people have to stay in the bullpen. And this was definitely a guy who had to stay in the bullpen. And he was
I
unhinged. He was crazy. He was talking about
yeah.
doing shootings. He was a school shooter type. Do you remember that? On X, he was
I
talking about, yeah, one of these days, he was going nuts on X and on Facebook back in 2018, 2019. And then
Wow.
we made fun of him on one of these shows, and he went scorched earth about it. And that was the end. And then out of the blue, maybe a year or two ago, I remember he liked one of my tweets. And I was like, oh God, we haven't fully escaped. We're still being
He's
monitored.
he's back. Yeah, I don't even have recollection of that show. I was trying to remember what I said. I'm sure I didn't like the remakes, especially the most recent one, but I honestly thought there was only one remake. I guess I just put
Memory
both
hold
of
it.
those together. Yeah. And because I honestly can't remember anything from the 2003 remake,
I think it was like
2006 remake.
2004, yeah, 2006 is
Six.
right.
And the 2019 one is when they made them all like millennial teens, and that was horrendous. But I think this is a really fun pick. I'm glad that you've never seen it before because I'm curious as to what you have to say about it. You can really tell how much this movie influenced 80s horror right from the start. The first scene is a point of view of the killer, which is how what Friday the 13th starts. That's what 6 years after this, right?
This is the first
Also,
slasher movie, isn't it?
uh, I think so. I think it might be, yeah, 74. Is it
There's
considered
nothing
the
that would
first?
properly precede this and feel like an authentic slasher film, right? I mean, you could always point to Abbott and Costello meet the Wolf or something like that, right? But this is it.
Yeah, I'm thinking Alice. Oh, Alice with Alice is 76, so that's after. Yeah, probably yeah. But is does Halloween also start point of view of Michael? It does, right?
Yes. Yeah, because
So
he's in
they're
the mask, and you're only given the shot of Michael as a boy once they take the mask off because he's dressed up for Halloween.
oh right, yeah. So big influence from this movie, I guess. And it's funny to think that it's a movie, a Canadian production from a writer that seems like he only wrote one other thing. It's a TV show called Adventures of Timothy Pilgrim, which was a 15-minute show about a 1970s boy and an 1870s elixir peddler having adventures in Toronto with a magic trunk. So it's like a kids show that he wrote, and he went from that to Black Christmas. Well, Black Christmas and then this show a year later. And that's well, he did a TV movie called Riel, and then another movie called The Last Chase, which is a PG movie about a futuristic California. And that's it. And yeah, let me hear what you think about this movie.
Well, I think right off the top, I was not in a horror mood when this movie was selected, and it came in after Christmas. So I was like, all right, we'll cover a Christmas movie after Christmas. And I've been so fatigued by anything slasher or horror related or gory. It just has not been my cup of tea for a while now. I do like it in certain forms, like The Substance, I was a big fan of when I went to go see that in the theater. Mass State Lottery, some people say this is horror adjacent. I would agree. And if for those of you who are watching or not watching, on patreon.com/lowres, if you're watching, I am wearing a Mass State Lottery crew neck, which is available now in the shop at lowres.org. Get yours today before they sell out. And on the whole, I just needed a break, I think, from the horror genre. But
Mm.
watching this, I think because it was so early and it did give birth to the slasher genre, I didn't have a problem with it. And I really enjoyed many of the creative flourishes that are here because Bob Clark is the director. And Bob Clark, he's the real deal. I mean, this is the guy who directed Porky's 2 the next day, you know? It's
Yeah, Blonde
amazing
and
what he went
Blonde,
on to.
Blonde and Blonder,
He did
right?
Porky's 2 and A Christmas Story in the same year.
Wow.
That is a renaissance man.
He did Baby Geniuses.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of his
Uh,
career.
he did uh, don't recognize any other
He
movie.
ended his career on
Porky's freaking
Blonde
Stu-
and Blonder and
Yeah.
did not, the man who did Baby Geniuses did not want director credit, and Baby Geniuses 2, Super Babies, did not want the director credit on Blonde and Blonder. And he died like the year it came out. What an unfortunate demise for Bob Clark. Great
What would you
director.
what would you prefer your last movie to be? The Karate Dog, Super Babies 2, or Blonde and Blunder?
Wow. What is the Karate Dog?
I don't know, but
That sounds like the best pick of those three, though, for certain. That makes me think of what was it? A Karate Miracle Christmas, where the dude's father makes a mass shooting happen and then disappears, and then Eric Roberts is somewhere in there. John Voight. Oh my God.
yeah,
Reg
that's
Tupper.
the
The
voice
name
of
of the
Chevy
man
Chase.
puppeting the dog is Reg Tupper,
It's got Simon Rex, Jamie Presley, and John Voight. What the fuck?
and featuring Chevy Chase as the voice of this
Of
dog,
that puppet, I guess. It doesn't look very real.
but also Reg Tupper. And
Oh,
this is not Simon
hell
Rex as he is
yeah.
today. I know it looks pretty good.
Hell yeah.
Why
Look at a
not?
dog doing karate.
Any
So this
man
one,
would end his career on this note. It's such a respectable conclusion. Wow. Okay. Well, Black Christmas, however,
yeah.
I thought that, okay, well, it has the benefit of feeling like one of these eerie thrillers from back in the 70s that they don't really make anymore, like The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane,
Mm,
or, and so I liked the killer POV. I liked the lighting and the set design of the movie. It feels very cozy, it feels authentic. And you have a pretty good cast here. You have Margot Kidder. You have Olivia Hussey, who just died recently. She was in the It TV movie. She played Bill Denborough's wife. And she's a total babe in this film. She looks very good. But it's a pretty solid horror movie. And he is able to tap into something in those phone calls that are made to the house. They're gratuitous, they're a bit over the top at times, but there's something about the voice, the cadence, the octave that feels very unnerving and feels creepy in a real way and not in a horror movie way. And that's something that has absolutely been lost to time because now when people go into their headspace of what's scary, what's creepy, what's going to frighten people, they go based off of past horror movies and not life, not history, not what is
yeah.
actually eerie. Like one of the scariest things that ever happened to me as a kid was trying to make a phone call in my room late at night, calling the wrong number and having someone on the other line pick up the phone, get all breathy and say something in like this very dark, raspy voice, like, "What are you?" Like that. And I was like, scared as fuck at 10 o'clock. I'm 9 years old. I hang up the phone and I'm like running into my mom's room and waking her up and like, hey, somebody just said this on the phone to me. Really, really creepy stuff.
It's very innocent, right? It's like you can tell that it's like a more innocent time. I like the fact that it starts with a murder, and then the whole movie is about like we need to investigate this murder, and the body it's always in the attic the whole time. Like the whole time the victim is inside the house, but everyone's freaking out, but trying
Hmm.
to find where this victim is. It's a very, very creative way of dealing with that, I guess, and also making sure that the threat is always there, even though nobody knows, just the audience. I think that that adds a big layer of like having to pay attention to everything that happens in the house because you know that at any point this killer can just come out of the attic and kill them. And For 1974, I think it's a groundbreaking, I would say, when it comes to creating suspense and making this slasher feel more threatening than it actually is. Because especially once it's revealed who the killer is, or I guess what we think the killer is, it's just that guy, you know. So if that's revealed right from the start and we see him, I don't think this movie would have the same effect as what happens when we keep the killer hidden for like 95% of the movie and then there's like this little reveal at the end. So I think it does a really great job at setting suspense and tension without needing gore. Like I feel like the kills here are really well made, and you know the asphyxiation one right at the start with the bag, they're pretty brutal, but they don't have to be um, that graphic or that gory for them uh, to work because the world that we've set up is such a wholesome, such a safe world that something like that is like, oh shit, you know, that first death immediately, the
Hmm.
second death with the older lady that had that really funny bit about hiding bottles of what is it, rum or whiskey all over the house, and she gets what a hook into her, and then she gets pulled up, and then she's dead. So like we don't really see it's way before, I guess, deaths were that graphic on screen, but
Yeah,
because
people are
of
showing
the
up to this movie in 74 and they're not expecting to see very
yeah,
visually visceral murders. I mean, the bag over the face, the strangulation is jarring. It's a
Yeah.
jarring image, and he goes back. He uses it very wisely in terms of when it comes into play, and it's this disturbing thing that certainly back in the 70s. I mean, what is the most disturbing movie that has come about at that time? It's The Exorcist the year before, and that's fresh. That's brand new. But this isn't
Hmm.
on that reservation. This is completely different. We're talking about a serial killer. So you have this movie and you have Texas Chainsaw coming out back to back. Earth-shattering films for that genre.
Was this released in the States? Oh, it was released. Okay, so in Canada, it was released in October of 74, and then it was released in the States in December.
Okay, well, hold on.
Yeah.
Did Texas Chainsaw then beat Black Christmas to the punch? Because I would consider Texas Chainsaw a slasher film, even if you don't have a knife, right? I think that qualifies.
Texas Chainsaw was released October 11th, same day that this movie was released in Canada. It was released in
Okay,
the United States. Yeah.
all right. You know what? Fine. That's a draw.
Yeah.
What a day for movies.
Right. For influential horror.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I really can't you know you know the stylization of the movie does so much to elevate it and make it feel like a classier movie than it actually is. It's a pretty trashy movie. But because Bob Clark is a master of the craft, it comes across a hell of a lot better than if somebody took the exact same script and the shot list and tried to apply it themselves. It wouldn't have the same effect here.
Mhm.
This is good entirely because of him. And the actors are good too, but really not much is required of them. They got to run around, they got to scream, they got to yell, they're doing this, they're doing that. And Olivia Hussey is pretty, but she's not really
Mhm.
giving much. She doesn't have to give much either.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I was expecting, though. And I found myself really in tune with the later half of the film once things start winding down. And you had a question about the ending of the movie before we started the show tonight, where maybe you were a bit confused. You want to lay that out?
Yeah, I was just like I saw this a couple of days ago. No, yesterday night, I think. And I couldn't remember if we find hey, you fuck. Sorry, my cat just attacked me. The I couldn't remember if the killer was the boyfriend or not. Then I think uh the movie kind of presents it as yeah, Peter, who's the boyfriend, is the killer, but then at the end you hear the killer's voice coming from the room upstairs or something, right? And because no one finds those bodies.
Well,
So then it's
we
like,
have the whole plot of Olivia Hussey's character has this ongoing drama with her boyfriend where she wants to abort his baby. He doesn't want that. He's very upset about that. And then when you're getting many of these prank calls to the house, the caller is an adult man going, "Mommy," and doing that type of
yeah,
shit.
yeah,
And so
being like, oh, oh, cunt, 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 which I thought was kind of funny. We
yeah,
just
no,
juxtaposed.
the ones that go really gratuitous, I think,
Yeah,
are a bit too much. You know, maybe somebody
yeah,
was a
just
little too influenced by Linda Blair's swearing in The Exorcist. I don't know, but I think the
yeah, because
voice.
it feels like it's like just a couple of teenagers just being shitheads
Mhm.
right at the beginning, the first call, because they're being like, "Oh, you're gonna suck me off, ha ha ha, suck me off, you can't," and it's like, "All right, guys." So at first, it's played as like this is so annoying, but then it becomes like an issue that the movie kind of runs on that, right? On the calls, because then you have the police going after them, where we have, I believe, the only recognizable actor, which is John
John
Saxon, right?
Saxon from Enter the Dragon
And
and
to,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
yeah, and his whole thing is trying to find this killer, and you have 1974's technology trying to what track the call or where the call is coming from,
Hmm.
and that story runs throughout the movie right up. until the end or the first, oh sorry, the last, I think the last 20 minutes is when they realize that, oh, the call's actually coming from inside the house, you know? So we have like an hour 20 of them trying to solve that mystery. And the movie kind of depends on those phone calls to continue with the story. And it's a very interesting way of driving a story forward, especially for the time where I'm
Yeah.
sure that technology was very early,
And of
which I guess,
course, it's hackneyed now, but the call is actually coming from inside the
yeah.
house. I was just waiting for that, and it maybe is the first movie to do that, so
Hmm.
you can't neg it based off of those means. But when a stranger calls owes
Yeah, I was
everything
about
to
to
this movie.
I was about to say, yeah, exactly. Just remember that there's two, right? There's an original and there's I remember the
There's a
remake. I
few.
remember seeing the trailer on the theater and
When
it's
a
like yeah,
stranger
just
calls was originally a short film, which is why the movie's broken up into two halves, where you have the Carol Kane character picking up the phone when she's babysitting, and then you cut later on when she's got, I believe, kids of her own. She's got a family life, and it happens again. That's what happened with that. The first half of the movie was used to fund the second half and turn it into a feature, which was a good financial move. They did a sequel in the 1980s that I believe was a TV movie. And then there was a remake around the same time of the horror remake Explosion, which we were talking about it before, but this movie fell victim to that,
oh
certainly.
yeah. Hmm.
It's kind of interesting to look at the aughts and that span of time and how every single horror movie, slasher movie from the 80s, from the 70s, had its day of being remade as a piece of shit PG-13 Michael Bay style film.
Yeah, it seems like they were all remade by someone that didn't understand what works on the original. So then it's nothing like the original and it's for nobody.
Somebody in
And they're all
Hollywood who's like 40 years old hired music video directors to
mm,
redo all of these movies and disregard the spirit or the character of the original. I do think Texas Chainsaw is an exception to that rule. The 2003 remake is
Jessica Biel.
terrific and probably the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Is that the
Uh,
Jessica Biel
yeah,
remake?
yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, the
And
best
then
is Chainsaw Massacre movie you said? Better than the original to you?
it's certainly the best Jessica Biel movie.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they also did Friday the 13th. I remember fans of Friday the 13th hating that movie so much when it came out, and I always liked it. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed the Friday the 13th remake.
I saw it in the theater. Yeah, what perfect nipple placement, right? That's a line from the movie.
I think so.
And then
I
you
liked
have
how
the
there was basically a short Friday the 13th film to open the
yeah.
movie for the rest of the Friday the 13th movie that was there. And it was, these movies were successful and they chose not to give them sequels for whatever reason. It's kind of questionable in retrospect. I don't know. But this fell into that line of fire. Sometimes it seemed like, all right, the success rate of these movies in terms of being good slasher movies, good horror movies, was kind of 40%. Their success at the box office was generally pretty high. These movies always did well. My Bloody Valentine 3D, which starred the other guy from Supernatural who actually has a
Yeah.
career at this point. What's his
S-
name?
Jared Padalecki.
No, no, no. He was he's you. That's you. That's you with long
Oh,
hair. That was Friday the
uh
13th.
oh yeah, no. I think you're was he on that?
Yeah, he was the star of Friday the 13th.
You're thinking of the other guy then. The other guy that was on oh fuck, what was his
He
name
did the
from
voice in a
Supernatural?
Batman animated movie as the Red Hood, and now he's on The Boys.
Jensen Ackles.
Jensen Ackles. How could I forget a name like Jensen Ackles? He starred in My Bloody Valentine 3D, and I started watching that movie on Tubi because I had never seen it before, but I remember it blowing up at the box office, and
Yeah,
that movie is entirely responsible for
it's
why 3D was a thing for the next 5 or 6 years. Why every single movie had as many 3D showings as regular. Why you had to show up in fucking glasses and get a headache 40 minutes into every movie. It's that movie's fault.
remember those years? That was a rough time. They were all usually pretty bad. I remember Beowulf. Remember the Beowulf animated movie that was also in 3D, and you had Angelina Jolie, I think, plays a role where it's like, oh my God, she's kind of naked in it, and it's like just animated.
Hmm.
That was like a big thing.
Written by Roger Avery, who's blaming these Los Angeles fires on Antifa.
Of course. I remember seeing that Bloody Valentine remake on in the theater. I was one of those suckers that went to see it in 3D. And I had fun. It's a big piece of shit. It's like a really bad movie, but I had fun in the theater. I think from all the 3D movies that I saw around that time, which were a bunch, because I really like going to the theater, and that's you got a lot of those around the time. I think this was probably one of the ones that used the 3D in a fun way that you didn't really get for most of them. Most of them would use them as like uh, part of the scenery, so that you see foreground and background, and that was kind of it. So that was usually kind of disappointing, because then the movie would end up just becoming a gimmick for the 3D, and then the movie was just a big piece of shit. I feel like most of those three movies from the time were kind of like that.
Hmm.
But this one was fun. It was a big. I haven't seen it since it came out, and you were gonna tell me that it was a big piece of shit, right?
It was, but no, you're exactly right. It was a fun movie.
Yeah.
For what it was. It was exactly what it needed to be.
Hmm.
And you have these actors in it who are strictly television actors finally soaking up the big screen, and they're having fun with it. That these
Yeah.
movies didn't need to be smart or creatively inventive. They just had to do their job. And that's something that I'll give that era credit for, that we've gotten away from, is most of these movies don't do their job. They're trying to aim higher and in a different lane. And so you can take a look at the Black Christmas remake from 2006, and I watched the trailer to that, and I was like, I was stunned by it, because
Hmm.
it occurred to me that the person who made this, if Marcus Nispel, or who was the director of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake from 2009, maybe Marcus Nispel directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre and not that one. It was whoever directed the Smells Like Teen Spirit Nirvana music video. Whoever did that and helmed Nightmare
Uh,
on Elm Street.
Samuel Bayer.
Okay, Samuel Bayer, and whoever helmed the script, the producers on that movie did not get Nightmare on Elm Street. They tried to
Yeah.
make it darker and edgier, and there's room for that, but you got to do it the right way, and you have to make it feel like there's connective tissue between where it began and where it is. And doing full CG burnt Freddy when you don't need to do that, that was a big mistake. Big, big,
Yeah, and
big
also
mistake.
take all the personality away from Freddy Krueger. And then it's like, why would I watch this? You have the Robert England, whose whole thing is look at how much personality Freddy has, and instead just make it into a creep. Which is,
Hmm.
oh, he always was. Like he always was a creep.
He
We
started
understand
as
his,
a creep primarily,
yeah,
for certain.
we understand his backstory and whatever, but that character was fun. It was more than just a creep. So you kind of wanted to see Freddy on screen. With that remake, they didn't understand what was attractive about that character. So instead, they got a really good actors. I think Jackie Earl Haley, however you say his fucking name.
Jackie
I th
Mason.
I think he's great, and I think he's he was a good pick to play that character. But you took the personality away from Freddy, so then he's just a pedophile that's burnt that lives in your mind, and it's like that's not as fun. You're not having fun with it anymore. So that's yeah, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the character is and why it works and why people were still to this day interested. Well, I don't know if to this day, but up to that point, interested of seeing Freddy Krueger on screen. Even though, if you really look at that whole series, how many good Friday the 13th, I mean Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street movies are there? Two, three, but they're fun, which is what you get from that character, right? And
I
if
think they're
you,
all, I mean, they're all pretty good. I watched the Dream Warrior or the
mm,
Dream Child on Halloween, and that was one of my lesser favorite ones, but I watched it and I was like, this is kind of maybe, we often talk about the creative bankruptcy, but I
yeah,
watched that and I took for granted when I was younger the creative fortitude it took to create to make all these puppets and weird versions of Freddy coming out of this woman's belly, and it was really interesting and enriching in some sense to see that, because nowadays it would just be a bunch of pixels that somebody would prepare on the screen in Blender and fucking, then
Yeah.
that's the movie. But all that to say, I don't want to trail too far off. The Black Christmas, and I didn't watch the remake from 2006, but I watched the trailer to that. And I was like, the people who helmed Nightmare on Elm Street still had a sense of what that was compared to this. This feels so far away from anything Bob Clark did with Black Christmas in
Oh yeah.
1974. It's
Hmm.
remarkable. And so I was sitting there watching it, and I knew that there was another remake that you had talked about with the terroristic former politician guest from Canada on Jake's show. I'm sure that archive is wiped. And I thought, okay, let's play a game with myself. Will this trailer from 2019, 2018,
19.
will that
19.
be better than the 2006 one? Because I thought the 2006 one was really, really, really bad. And I find that era charming. I find those movies charming, but I thought that trailer was so bad and did not get the idea at all. And I thought, okay, I bet, I bet it's going to be the same. I bet it's going to
Hmm.
be the exact same in a different way. And the trailer started, and it veered into that direction of being the same, but in a different way. It's like, okay, 10 years later, we have different ethos now. We're
Yeah.
applying it differently. It's not the high pitched, metal sheet noise followed by a slasher
Mm.
villain. And, you never even really see the killer in Black Christmas.
Yeah.
You never see that guy. He's just
That's the
there. He's
point.
killing people.
Yeah.
In this one, they show you a masked man. They show you a statue underneath a masked man. They show you many masked men. They show you the big twist of the movie that it's Carrie Yules and it's
Oh yeah.
society and the school, and the girls gotta fight back. It's time for fucking women to fight back against the patriarchy. And I was like, okay, this is worse. This is actually worse than the 2006 one. This is a hell of a lot worse because
Yeah.
not only did you not get it, you made a totally different movie using the name. The only thing that is a through line here is it's a it's a sorority at a college.
Yeah. They've Riverdaled Black Christmas.
No, no, no,
Not
no.
even.
I wouldn't even say that. Riverdale, Riverdale at least tried something. They borrowed the characters. Like there's more
Effort.
respect
Yeah.
for the source
Okay.
material there.
It just feels very like Disney Channel trying to do horror to me, from what I can
Mm.
remember, really. And what you just said about Cary Elves or Earl, how do you say his name? That just reminded me. All right, he was in that, and I just remember that the whole movie just feels like it's shot on a set, and everything just feels very artificial, and like they just use the name because some horror nerds might recognize it. Because this movie's not really a movie that a regular person would mention when it comes to like big slashers. Probably because it really didn't make that much money. But I feel like even though it did influence a lot of later horror movies, Black Christmas is not a movie that you hear mentioned that much compared to those other ones. And yeah, I feel like neither of those movies understand what works about it, and they just try to use the name, a recognizable name, and then just try to modernize it. But how difficult is it to just the horror movie that happens inside a house? Like it's not a very difficult story to tell. It's just you need the empowerment in the 2019 where it's like, well, no, it's actually the girls that are going to do this, and then they have to fight together, or 2000 what 6 where like a different
2006, it just kind of looked like a standard slasher film from the era.
from that time, yeah, like a Ouija or like those cheap horror movies that made a shitload of money, but they're just
Hmm.
pieces of shit that nobody remembers from the time. And to me, at least this one, it's still untouched. Like it's still 74. They haven't been able to do one that does it justice, and it's really unfair to mention the other two, I think. And if you ever get to see them, you'll see why. Because this one, I think that the original one does such a good job at setting up the wholesome Christmas feeling, and neither of the other two feel like the Christmas aspect. It's like an extra that is like an afterthought that where it's just like, well, let's add Christmas lights and snow, and it's Christmas, as opposed to this 1974 one where you get a little bit more of a like a family feeling, even though they're not related, even though they just live in this house. And there's a bit of a cozy feeling to it that you don't get on the other two. So for to me, this is one of the classics that still has not been touched. I want to say just because those two remakes are so completely different to even the tone of the original that it feels like a what's the my cousin's instead of the Christmas vacation is like cousin
Cousin
whatever
Eddie's
retard.
Island
Yeah,
Vacation.
yeah, that's what they feel like to me because it's like yeah, you have the same name, but the movies are not at all the same. It's like
I
completely
wouldn't even
understand.
give it that. I would give it National Lampoon's Thanksgiving Vacation, which had
Right.
nothing to do with it. It was literally
Yeah.
just a Thanksgiving movie with Judge Reinhold and Bryan Cranston that they renamed Vacation
Oh
because
yeah,
why not?
when Bryan Cranston was still playing goofy guy on
When
everything
he was the Hal from Malcolm in the Middle character for everything he was
for
doing.
everything, just a goofball before he aged 30 years and then all of a sudden now he's a serious actor.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. One thing that I did enjoy is that the creative decisions about how to handle the thriller aspects of the movie are dealt with in a way that is smart for the era and smart for the time. The thing like, oh, the call's coming from inside the house, I think was inventive for that period. Probably, absolutely. And handling the ending with this ambiguity where she kills her boyfriend, she aborts her boyfriend, and yet the killer is actually still upstairs in the attic, and the police didn't even find the woman who was strangled with the plastic bag in the attic. We're ending on the same shot we started with, but now with a dead body hanging out in the window, is such a creepy,
hmm
cool, masterful way to close out this movie.
Well, both of them, right? The old lady and the original girl, they're both in the attic, still dead, and they never found them. And it just ends as, well, I guess this is the guy, even though I think he's already dead when they find them together, right? I think he tries to attack. It's
No,
kind
no,
of
no.
like,
She killed him. She shot him, thinking he was the killer, and he wasn't the killer.
right, when he comes to get her with like his creepy face, and then she shoots him, and the
Which, how
police
did he
just,
know she was in the basement? There's a
mean,
lot of big question marks here, but that's, I
it's
think,
74. Yeah.
it's part of something that is good about the movie is they lead you one way and then they give you something else entirely while leaving just enough plausible deniability there for you to question what it is you saw or why that character made that decision.
I'm really surprised that they didn't continue that story, especially after, the 80s became such a sequel uh, decade, especially for horror, because this movie made like 10 times its budget, 6 million out of 680,000. And having such an open ending right that you think that they would try to squeeze something out of that in the 80s, and they just didn't touch it for 30 years
Hmm.
somehow.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really. It probably didn't immediately come to mind as something that would be milkable because slasher films didn't pop off until at least Friday the 13th. That's 1980. 6 years have passed. Bob Clark certainly isn't interested in
Mm,
revisiting the horror genre seemingly at all because he's doing Porky's and A Christmas Story. The Halloween aspect of the Halloween movies is not present, not something that feels very focal. Michael Myers is what feels focal. You could have a Halloween movie that
mhm,
takes place in June. So it escaped the title. Black Christmas, you can't escape Christmas.
mhm.
There's nothing you can do. The killer, who is the killer? We don't know
Yeah.
what does he look like? You can't base it off the back of that. So, all right, well, you're limiting yourself to releasing the movie at one time of year. Christmas and it's a horror movie, how many people are going to want to show up to the theater in the 1980s around Christmas time to see a horror movie? We're talking about a much more wholesome Christian Western society. They might, I don't know. They didn't put that to the test, though. And that's why you don't really have any Christmas movies that happen to dabble in the slasher genre aside from, what is it, Holy Night, Christmas, Bloody Christmas. What was the fucking garbage day?
I'm trying to look for that Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Silent Night, Deadly Night.
That has 3 or 4, where it's just a guy that kills with an axe
in the first one,
Claus, right?
It was the first one that was successful. The second one, didn't they just show half of the first movie again for the second one? And
I think so.
Threw
Yeah,
in Garbage Day, that. And then that was it.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, okay, Silent Night, Deadly Night. I think I've only seen the first one, and Black Christmas is a much better movie. But I think what we like about the movie that it doesn't depend on a killer. I think it's probably what kept it from becoming more, I guess, marketable for sequels. Because yeah, if you don't have if your killer is just, well, it's a guy that's hiding in the attic, it's, I guess, more difficult to sell that idea. Apparently, the movie was called Silent Night, Evil Night, originally, or at least in the U.S.
Silent Night, Deadly Night is a hell of a lot better of a title
than Black Christmas.
No. Oh wait, this was called that?
Yeah, it says here. Hold on.
Wow, they totally cribbed that.
For the American release, the film was retitled to Silent Night, Evil Night due to fears that the original title would mislead audiences into believing the film was a blaxploitation movie. They retracted the title after the initial release, restoring it to Black Christmas for subsequent screenings. So originally it was that.
Well, you got Dracula, Black Frankenstein, Black whatever.
Yeah, it's a creepy poster too. Let me show you.
Oh yeah, that's definitely built for a newspaper there.
It's a lot more sexual, I guess, than what the movie actually is.
Damn, I'm getting horny looking at this. Look at those fucking hamstrings.
Yeah, look at those skinny legs.
Lakeshore. Tales from the Crypt. Why does it say Tales from the Crypt? Has nothing to do with Tales from the Crypt.
Nothing. I guess it's like, hey, recognizable horror thing.
Yeah, Dracula. That should just put Dracula on there. Christmas is coming early this year. And it's murder.
In a drive-in at 8:50 p.m.
I don't understand what that is. What is this? Is fucking total nonsense. Christmas is coming early this year, and it's murder. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean?
If this picture doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight.
So what are they calling you, a square? Saying loosen up, buddy. I don't understand.
Rated R? I didn't know they had those ratings in the 70s already.
Mm-hmm. There was PG, R, and G. That's all you had.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the movie, by the way. I just think it's a really funny advertisement there. You're selling a movie where a naked girl's in it, and there's no naked girls in this movie. Right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, there's no naked girls. 58 locations against the movie. Film ended theatrical. Yeah, it wasn't third highest grossing Canada film of all time at the time, because it made 2 million in Canada. 2 million in Canada. Behind the apprenticeship of Duty Kravitz. Have you ever heard of that?
Duty Kravitz. No. Is that related to Lenny Kravitz? Is that his Jewish father?
So Richard Dreyfuss, Randy Quaid movie?
Oh, it's a movie. No.
I've never
Duty
heard of
Kravitz. Starring Randy Quaid and Richard Dreyfuss? I bet I'd like this. Duddy Kravitz. I have heard of this. The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. Actually, I think I started watching this because it auto-played on Tubi after I watched The Swimmer.
A brash young Jewish Montrealer who embarks on this is DC, embarks on a string of get-rich-quick schemes.
Is DC Jewish? I know he went to Israel.
Well, isn't he from, like, Albania or something? I'm sure.
He has some ambiguous large sum of money that he just uses all the time.
I thought you were going to say nose. Yeah, maybe. I mean, Shishi is a name, right?
Is that his
Sounds
real name?
sounds
Shishi?
kind of GB.
He changed it to
Uh,
DC because that sounds more Anglo.
yeah,
Shishi? That sounds
Shish,
Chinese as fuck. He's a
Shish,
Chinese Jew?
a Chinese
DC's
Jew from
Chinese and
Montreal.
Jewish? DC, you got to come back on the show.
Yeah,
I think
Chinese
we need to clear
Jew,
this up. What does the
Darius
C stand for? Chinese.
Shishishi, Darius Shishishi, the
The
Montreal
Jewish
Jew.
Chinese is DC.
Yeah, this movie actually doesn't sound. It kind of sounds like Northern Exposure. Not to mention that again. Just a young Jewish guy that tries to get money quickly, starring Richard Dreyfuss. This
Okay,
might
I'm in.
this might actually be good. Yeah,
Now, somebody want to
directed by
sponsor us to talk about the apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, this forgotten gem of a movie?
is the directed by Ted Kotcheff, who directed Waking Fright, Weekend at Bernie's, First
Wow.
Blood.
Okay. Something I really appreciate about the directors of this era is the versatility in the projects that they would take on. Bob Clark jumping from Black Christmas to Porky's. Ted,
Yeah,
whatever the hell his last name was, doing Wake and Fright, which is one of the most hardcore, brutal fucking movies that was made in the 1970s, jumping to this type of movie.
well, he has a Of Mice and Men TV movie in 68. You have Waking Fright 71. Uh let's see. Fun with Dick and Jane, the original, 77. First Blood, Weekend at Bernie's. You have two episodes of the Red Shoe Diaries.
Ooh, nice, sexy. He didn't lose that sexy spirit from Wake and Fright.
Yeah, and then later he did a 7 episodes of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, and then what is this? Rambo First Blood.
All I'm hearing is this guy loves sex.
Yeah, sounds like a horny person. Ted Kotcheff, Toronto, Bulgarian parents. So like DC. Um,
Yes,
uh,
exactly. All right. I think we have reached our conclusion with this episode of movies here. Black Christmas, very solid selection. One of the better horror movies of the 1970s. And thank you to Dream Machine for sponsoring this episode. And again, I got to plug it. I also got to plug these Mass State Lottery crew necks if you want to buy some. Lowres.org. They are on sale now, along with a bunch of other merch we have in the shop. Go over to patreon.com/lowres and join our listener-sponsored tier, and you can decide an upcoming episode of movies and the subject matter that we're going to discuss during it. So, any final thoughts before we close out this episode of the show?
no, I was just reading something that I thought was interesting that apparently the movie before it premiered on NBC under the title Stranger in the House, it was premiering as a Saturday Night at the Movies, which is a weekly segment that NBC used to have. But 2 weeks prior to the premiere, there was a sorority house in the Florida State University where a double murder happened, where two girls that were asleep on their bed were bludgeoned to death. And then the killer went to a nearby room of the sorority house and violently attacked two more sleeping students who survived. And it's apparently Ted Bundy.
Oh,
Yeah. So apparently, a few days before the film was set to premiere, the Florida governor contacted NBC asking them to not show the movie because it was too similar to the murders. And then it wasn't until, let me see, Tuesday, January 24th, where NBC gave the affiliates the option of showing Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, instead of Stranger in the House.
isn't Doc Savage a DC Comics? Not to bring up DC again, a DC Comics character?
I believe it's Pulp Magazine.
Because I'm pretty sure Luca Guadagnino and Justin Koritsky is going to be helming, or that's what they're saying anyway. They're going to be helming that for DC Comics, which I don't believe that's ever going to happen. I think they just took a paycheck there. I really hope the rumor that the American Psycho movie with Austin Butler isn't happening. That's just some sort of press scheme. I really hope that's not true because I think that's going to be an interesting movie if it happens.
Doc Savage is a DC Comics character. Yeah.
Okay. Well, glad we have that settled.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on Black Christmas here?
Yeah, if you haven't seen it and you like horror, I think it's required viewing because it's you can really see the influence in a lot of movies when you see it, especially if you think of how this was possibly the first one to do all of these things. So it's an interesting watch just for that alone. But then the movies are also really good. So if you haven't seen the 74 Black Christmas, skip the sequels or the remakes and put this on and enjoy yourself thinking that it's still December, I guess. Because it does have that feel to it, but it's definitely a recommend for me.
Yes, it really helped reinforce that it's still Christmas in my household,
Hmm.
which you guys who are only listening to this and not checking out our YouTube channel wouldn't know. I have a Christmas tree in the backdrop here. So, we're going to be putting out some more episodes of the show in the weeks and months to come over on the Low Res Wonder Bread YouTube channel. And we also have a YouTube channel that is exclusively going to become episodes of movies and clips of movies, a podcast about the act of cinema. We will feature in the description of this episode links to both of my channels there. And you are more than welcome to re upload clips of the show. This is something I want to encourage as well. We have people in the Discord who have cut clips of the show and posted it there. If you want to repost segments of the show, I will not copyright strike you. As a matter of fact, I'll probably repost you because we want to get our listenership up in 2025. Apparently, according to the Spotify statistics, my analytics that I watch every single day, in 2024, we gained 74% of our listenership, our
Nice.
current listenership, which is insane. But it makes sense when we take a look at the numbers, the downloads, everything else. Most people are listening to this show. And that doesn't reflect over on YouTube or on the movies YouTube page, certainly, because a lot of people don't even know that exists. I haven't promoted, I haven't really done anything with it. There's like 3 episodes that were uploaded that featured Brendan when we were talking about Heat. And then there was like a
Oh yeah.
Civic TV clip from 5 years ago that was on there. So we're going to be pushing that a little bit more in the coming months of the show. And again, you guys are encouraged to do whatever the hell you want with these episodes once they're out to the public. Just don't leak the Patreon exclusive ones. That's all I
Yeah.
would ask. But what am I going to stop you? Yes, I will. I'll pull a fucking Black Christmas on your home. I'll get my plastic bags ready. But anyway, that has been movies for this week. Thank you for listening.